Now we're going to take a look at how to control the highlights across your hair. The specularity and the gloss attributes really control this setup. While specularity controls the intensity, the gloss controls the concentration of that intensity across the hair. Okay, so let's take a look at these attributes here. Now, specularity is just that. It's going to control how specular the light is on that, or the specular value across each of these render hairs once the light hits it. So let's take a quick render of this set to 0.9, which is fairly bright. There we go. Not necessarily bright, but very specular, very shiny right here. And you can see how bright that is. Well, that is being controlled by this value right here. So if I was to set this to, let's say, 0.1, okay, we'll go to the other extreme and render this. You can tell we have actually dulled down our hair. Now, where would this be very important? Well, if you had a hair style that was more of a afro style, or maybe one that was a dirtier, mattier hair, or any of the kind of if you had a haircut that had, instead of gel, you had pomade, where it wasn't supposed to be shiny, it actually mats out the hair, then you're going to want to go ahead and lower the specular value. So now let me set this back to something high like 0.8, and let's talk about the specular tint. Now this is the color that we're seeing here. So if I set this to red, and we hit red, you can see that wherever we had that specular highlight, we now have red hairs. Well, that's all cute and fun, but here's a practical usage of this. Instead of leaving it at white, which is the default, go ahead and sample the tip color and then get it a little bit closer to white. So what this is going to do is create more of a richer and deeper looking hair color for your character. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so as you can see, instead of a pure white, we're now getting a color, a little bit of that color from the tip. So I'm going to store this while we talk about gloss. Now, gloss, the value only goes from 0 to 0.1 or 0.1. It's not a big amount of variation in here, okay? But a lot's happening. So if I set this to all the way 1, watch what happens. I'm going to have a very, very tight highlight. Okay, so if you look here, I'm not getting big, broad highlights. I'm getting very, very tight highlights, almost like if the hair was wet. Okay, we'll go ahead and store this. And let's take a look now if I set my gloss down very low, let's just say 0, and we'll now have very broad areas of highlights. All right, so as you can see here, this is with the gloss set to 0. This is with the gloss set to 0.1. And this was our default. So it gives you a great idea of how powerful these are. So let's set this to something like 0.08. So we want just not all the way to the top, but a little bit. And our specular highlight, let's set this to 0.4. So we're going to drop this in half and increase this by double. So let's see what we get here. All right, so we do have highlights now, but they're very rich highlights. Now you notice we did move our head around, and if we look in our scene, we don't have any lights. So obviously you're probably familiar with Maya to the point where you know that in the render globals up here, we have all those settings available for the renderer, and one of those settings in the I believe it is in the common tab here, is the enable default light. But what we found is even if you were to turn that off, the hair would be lit exactly the same way as it is right now. So the shave render buffer figures out if there's no light and then slips one in. So in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at how lights interact with this and how we can utilize some of these attributes right here.